China has put out a strong warning against the United States that conflict would be inevitable unless Washington changes course. Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang said today that the U.S. should change its distorted attitude towards China or, quote, conflict and confrontation will follow. Take a listen.
声称要经营中国，但不寻求冲突。实际上，美方所谓的竞争，就是全方位的遏制、打压，就是你死我活的零和博弈。如果美方不踩刹车，继续沿着错误的道路狂飙下去，再多的护栏也挡不住脱轨翻车，陷入对抗冲突。
China's foreign minister also defended Beijing's stance on the war in Ukraine and its close ties with Russia. China said an invisible hand was pushing for the escalation of the war in Ukraine to serve certain geopolitical agendas. He, however, did not specify who he was referring to. During a nearly 2-hour presser, Qin made a robust defense of China's wolf warrior diplomacy. The new Chinese foreign minister also warned of Beijing's red lines.
Regrettably, efforts to persuade peace and promote talks have been consistently undermined. It seems that there is an invisible hand pushing for the protraction and escalation of the conflict, using the Ukrainian crisis to serve certain geopolitical agendas. Asia, our Asia-Pacific region, should become an arena for win-win cooperation and not a chessboard for geopolitics. No Cold War should be allowed to be repeated in Asia. The Ukrainian crisis should not be repeated in Asia. The Taiwan question is the core of the core interest of China, the bedrock of the political foundation of China-US relations, and the first red line that must not be crossed in China-US relations. The United States has an unshakable responsibility for causing the Taiwan question. The reason we are talking to the United States about the Taiwan issue is to ask the United States not to interfere in China's internal affairs.
Earlier in the day, in a rare direct criticism of the United States, Chinese President Xi Jinping accused Washington of leading a policy of containment, encirclement, and suppression of China. President Xi also accused his country's private sector to boost innovation and become more self-reliant. China-U.S. ties have hit a new low in recent times, be it over Taiwan, potential support to Russia, or the economy. China and the United States are often found at odds with each other. Recently, China's technology ambitions have been hit with a raft of restrictions by U.S. and its Western allies. Beijing, for its part, has doubled down on the need to shift away from imports for sectors perceived as vital to national security. Okay, well, for more on this, we are joined by Edward P. Joseph, Senior Fellow at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. He's also a foreign policy analyst. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Edward, good to see you again. Here we are with China and the U.S. Once again, this time, China did not hold back, and its new foreign minister seems to be more hawkish than anyone, at least with his rhetoric. What do you make of all of this?
I think this is a concern, and this should be a concern not just in Washington, but in capitals around the world. What we see here is, of course, China's attempt to frame its policies exactly as the opposite of what they are. So you see Xi Jinping setting the tone with his speech where he directly, not obliquely, but directly accuses the United States of suppression of China. And you see the foreign minister, as you say correctly, Qin Gang, going into detail about this, when in fact it's Chinese expansionism in Asia that has worried so many of China's neighbors and tightened the relationship and, in fact, the reliance on the United States as a security guarantor. So we see that element of this, of China going on the attack as a way of disguising its own expansionist policies across Asia, and that includes, of course, the border, the very sensitive border issues with India. And at the same time, we also see the accusation that it is the United States that is this invisible hand. That's the reference Qin Gang is making, when in fact It is China's support of Russia that makes the continuing Russian aggression possible. Please.
So how should the United States react right now?
Well, we see in Washington that there is a very strong consensus across the political spectrum. So there's really no daylight, no difference between the way Democrats and Republicans approach the perception of a threat from China. Now, the reality is that we live in an interconnected world, and the United States does not seek or need any confrontation or conflict with China. That would be terribly destructive. But the realities are very complex. We have to understand this reality that China is exploiting Russia's aggression in Ukraine. We have to understand that it, on the one hand, talks about a peace plan, but the reality is that China benefits from this war. How? In two ways. Number one, because it's a distraction of the United States from the threat of Chinese expansionism in Asia. So that's number one. The United States is, and with its NATO allies and EU partners, is preoccupied providing this defense against Russian aggression to Ukraine. That's number one. The other is that it creates dependency on the part of Russia towards China. So Russia, Vladimir Putin has to come in a mode of weakness, of beseeching China for its support, critical support, to provide components, for example, for critical elements that Russia cannot obtain because of sanctions, to buy oil at discounted prices. So what the United States, the way they should react, Susan, it's a great question, is to work with all those who are threatened by Chinese expansionism, including India, for a unified stance. That's what the Quad is about, the policy with India, Australia, Japan, and the United States, and other steps to ensure that China understands that this attempt to divide and conquer will not work. And the other element is, of course, for countries to understand how China is exploiting the war in Ukraine and to have a unified stance against Russian aggression and take this tactic away from China. Please.
Thank you. Edward P. Joseph, Senior Fellow at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. Thank you for those insights, and we look forward to speaking to you again very soon on WION.
Likewise. Thank you very much.